Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Planet Muse, and we are joined by a special guest here, Jeff Algra. Thank you for coming onto the show, Jeff.
The pleasure is all yours. No, thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. So, yeah, during the early 90s, Jeff Algra was the drummer in the Australian band Seven Stories, who, after gaining a lot of commercial airplay, had a major breakthrough when they were signed by the Sony label, then CBS Records, to a 5-year record deal. The deal with Sony led to the critically acclaimed Judges and Bagmen album in 1990. At the ARIA Music Awards of 1991, Seven Stories were nominated for Breakthrough Artist, single for Sleeping Through Another War in 1990. Sleeping Through Another War and Walk Through Babylon were released by CBS as singles of the album. The band toured extensively throughout Australia, supporting artists such as Midnight Oil, INXS, The Black Sorrows, Hothouse Flowers, Hunters and Collectors, and Paul Kelly. High-profile producers T-Bone Burnett and Boom Crash Opera's Richard Pleasance were engaged by Sony for Seven Stories' second album, Everything You Want, Nothing That You Need, in 1993, which provided another 2 singles. The band toured Europe and North America to support the album. Seven Stories recorded a Triple J live at the Wireless and had a string of singles before the whole of Sony was instructed to drop everything and divert all energy to making Mariah Carey #1. Seven Stories subsequently disbanded in 1994. Jeff is still playing mainly in the Adelaide scene, enjoys the reputation of being one of Australia's most loved drummers because of his good time, great technical chops, and the ability to hear and understand the music beyond his own instrument. And add to this his consistent backing vocals and his boyish good looks. And after 5 decades working in the music industry, it's a joy to interview him for Planet Muse. So, Jeff, thank you again for coming onto the show. And
Yep.
to kick off the interview, what inspired you to start playing and making music?
I grew up in quite a musical home. I was the youngest of 5 children. Mum was always singing. She used to, believe it or not, she used to have to sing for the command in a Japanese prison camp. So she had quite a voice. I guess you wouldn't want to hit a bad note, would you? In that context, anyway. And Dad played harmonica. Pretty soon, my eldest brother was playing guitar and harmonica. My other brother still plays guitar and harmonica. And we were exposed to a lot of music, that particularly those seminal days of the 60s and 70s Australian music. I think what really kicked me off was seeing John Swan in my backyard, known as a recording artist, Swanee. And at that stage, he was playing drums, and I must have been about 9 years of age. And it really had a powerful impact on me. And then later, I managed to talk my way into the cinema to see Woodstock when I was 11 years of age. I got a peculiar look at the ticket box, but she allowed me in, a nice lady. And I was exposed to a bit more than rock and roll, as you can imagine. But Mike Shreve, particularly from Santana, who had just turned 20 years of age, had such a massive impact on me. So the following Christmas, I received bongos, drumsticks, practice pad. I became obsessed with it, really. So that was the kickoff point, I think.
Yeah, that sounds really amazing, especially like seeing John Swan in person back then, back in the day.
Yeah.
That sounds really amazing.
Yeah, I mean, he would have been, I don't know, 17 or something. And
Yeah.
sometimes I still see Swanee, and I'll remind him that it's all his fault.
Oh, it's good to have those relationships,
Yeah.
A classic memories. So who's your ideal musician to collaborate with and why?
To collaborate with? Because it's hard to know until you get in there, but are you talking about who I'd like to work with, or what my experience with who I have worked with?
Yeah, so it's pretty much like a bit of both. You could say who's
Yeah.
the ideal musician, so that you've
Okay.
worked with,
Well,
or you'd like to work with.
yeah. Um, well, big learning curves in the studio were firstly with Tony Elliott, who was a local guy at a studio in Bartell Street in the city. He'd done myriads of recording with, not the greatest equipment, I mean, money and all that, but he produced some pretty amazing work, and we had a good working relationship. Um, and then, my first recordings with Sony, there were big time people that just happened to be in town at the time, and but the producer Kevin Maloney had worked with early U2 and Sinead O'Connor, and
Wow.
so he was very precise, very meticulous, sometimes quite intimidating and frustrating, because it was my first time out with a big, a big deal, as far as the money was on the line with from Sony and so on. Time is money and all that sort of stuff when you're in the studio at that level. The other great experiences, of course, were with T-Bone Burnett. And it was just great to hang with him. And he was the best joke teller, but yeah, pretty relaxed in the studio. But the other guy, of course, was Richard Pleasance, who really was cutting edge back then in the 90s. I mean, he had some really quite, uh, he had some great ideas for the time. And I mean, it's my own opinion. In some ways, I think our second album was before its time, and that largely I attribute that to the songwriting, but also Richard's Richard's approach to production. It was quite innate. Subsequently, I've heard stuff on recordings that are just years later that are pretty much Richard had covered. Anyway. In terms of collaborating, I always wanted to work with Waddy Wachtel, who's the guitar player with, pardon me, he worked with Keith Richards and Expensive Winos. Um, I think he's partnered to, what's the name, the female singer from Fleetwood Mac, Stevie Nicks. I think they're partners at this time. At least there's a strong music collaboration. And he also works with Lee Sklar, the one of the most recorded electric bassists. But mate, these days I'm happy to work with anyone. you
True,
know,
true.
it's pretty
Yep.
tough out there at the moment. But anyway,
Excellent.
we
No, good choices. I like that. Very, very interesting. Um, so who are your top 3 favorite drummers and why?
wow, it's pretty hard to cut it down to that. But I think perhaps I might just keep it to my early influences. And after those sort of experiences, and in pre-teens, eventually started getting drum lessons, and I became aware of an Australian guy, Mark Kennedy, who has subsequently worked with, I don't know, he's allegedly done somewhere between 300 and 500 records, and produced all of Marcia Hines' biggest hits, and worked with a seminal kind of jazz rock band called Ez Rock. In fact, I think he was only 19 when he played on the single by Spectrum, I'll Be Gone. And he played on the first album, and then departed and was replaced. Um, But in more recent years, Mark and I have hooked up, become friends. He's invited me over to his house. Mark is a massive influence on me as a drummer, but also he's a really great person, and that's it's heartwarming to meet. It's not always a great thing when you meet your heroes. The other guy would be Ainsley Dunbar, and Ainsley Dunbar had done incredible work with Frank Zappa and the Mothers, and David Bowie, Journey. The only English drummer that I'm aware of to ever play with Frank Zappa, and he just had a style and has a style and approach that I simply love his playing, his sound. And great drummers, there's so many. I mean, Charlie Watts, just simply because of the simplicity of it, and the backbone approach to great songs. And earlier you said I had great technical chops, and I look at some of the kids coming up, and I kind of think that's funny, really. But just the way Charlie did what was required, never overplayed. It was serving the songs, and so that's a big part of my approach, I suppose, that it's important to really listen to what the other people are doing. And you're not there to just display your chops. You're there to play the music. And there's a young guy in town, Ben Todd, who's, he can read anything, can play anything. And I saw him with Super Jesus the other night, and he played the genre. He didn't try to fill every space. He played what was required, and he did it beautifully and with great time and great feel. And they're the sort of drummers I'm attracted to. I mean, I like really technical guys like Gavin Harrison, who plays Porcupine Trees. I listen to those guys like Vinnie Colaiuta, and I just absorb by osmosis. I don't try to actually do what they're doing, so I don't have any illusions that I would be able to play that stuff. For me, it's about playing songs. I mean, those guys do all that, but I'm trying to be humble, Alistair. It's not working.
I know what you mean. Like, I went and saw Virgil Donati, and I could never play drums like that either. He's on another level, but it's just amazing to watch, and it's very inspiring.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just amazing stuff.
I mean, my claim to fame with Virgil was we did a few short tours together, and he'd come out in his Carlton footy shirt, and we'd kick the footy, back and forward. And
Oh, wow.
very
That's
quiet,
wild.
unassuming guy, incredible drummer. Anyway.
Oh, that's nice. It's good that you have all these friendships over the years. That's great.
Look, can I just make an honourable mention? Of course, Michael Shreve, who, was with Santana for probably the first 6 or 7 albums. They kind of lost me after that, because Shreve to me was really the driving power behind everything that Santana was doing in those first albums. And
Oh, wow.
and I became Facebook friends with Shreve for a while, and it was incredibly generous. I answered all my questions, and he's still active today. An amazing guy, amazing drummer.
Wow. I'll definitely have to check out his work, his body of work. Sounds very
Yeah.
fascinating.
I recommend Caravanserai. That was album number 4 by Santana. Some
Okay.
beautiful stuff on there. Anyway. Next.
Yeah, I've heard some Satana stuff in the past, and I've been impressed by it. So it's probably because of his drumming as well. So uh, we yeah. So like, how well do you manage with improvisation?
Uh, it really depends who you're playing with. I mean, when as a band around town that I play with, we never. Well, anytime we did rehearse, we ended up playing. We would never play those songs that we rehearsed. It was usually a bonding kind of exercise, and uh, invariably, well, I don't think there's ever been a time in the 20 or so years that we played together that we ever had a set list. Sometimes the lead singer, Steve Brown, would just call a song on stage, just show the chord shapes with his guitar, and we'd follow. But it wasn't, it was all in 4/4. It wasn't like, hard figures or anything. But um, I think a lot of it is the people you're with and what. I mean, guys that can really improvise, that have really worked their chops, and they know the form, and they can play over 11 and 9 and 7 and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's another league for me. But um, I've always been shit at drum solos, and I'm still called to do some stuff. I mean, people will say to me, "That was great," but I don't believe them. Um, I don't think that's really my forte. Um, so, but music on the spot, when the band's really cooking, and sometimes you can just go right off and come back, and that there's something really beautiful when that happens. It's just a joy to play music rather than just parts. You know what I mean? Playing all the right
Mm.
notes. Which is all good, of course, in its own. Um, you know, it's necessary. Otherwise, people don't understand what's going on. But to have people that you play with that can just say, "Okay, we're going to just," without even thinking about it, go, out somewhere else and then come back. It's quite exciting. But I would, as a rule of thumb, I wouldn't say that I'm a great, that's a big part of my, you know, not my greatest arrow, you know, is improvisation. I would, don't know.
Do you find it easier when you've been playing with musicians for a long time, and you sort of like,
Totally.
it's not, yeah, it's almost like you can finish each other's sentences when you're talking, almost because you've been hanging around each other for a long time. I've heard experiences where musicians get to that point where they can really, they almost know what they're going to say next, but it's like that with music a little bit. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I had this with my wife the other day. We're coming out the driveway, and I had a question in my head, and she answered it verbally. I hadn't actually verbalized the question.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, that's 18 years of marriage. So I better be a little more careful about what I'm thinking, I suppose.
Psychic. It's all the psychic
Yeah, yeah.
abilities. Yes.
So yeah, to answer your question, when you've been playing with guys, but conversely, if you've been playing a long time and you're doing your work, and then someone new can come on board, and they've been playing as long as you have, but not necessarily together, sometimes that thing just happens straight away, and
Oh,
that's
okay.
exciting.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, describe your creative process when you write new music. So, like your creative process when you come up with new songs and all that.
Yeah, well, the guys that I'm working with that are doing original stuff generally have, um, they may have the whole song with all the ideas. I mean, that was certainly the case with Seven Stories, or with I mean, Andrew, the songwriter, was a drummer to start with, so he had pretty clear parts sometimes. And then on other occasions, he might just say, "Look, I've got some bones here. Can we just jam on them and see if we can put some flesh on it?" So um, generally, it's not hard and fast. But guys that I'm playing with now, Paul McLeod, a band called Paul on the Road. I think behind the scenes, quite often, Paul and the guitar player, David Rhodes, are generally working some sort of process up together. But they're very open to suggestions and ideas. And sometimes I'll just have a flash, I'm not a big contributor in as much as I don't want to walk over what's already been established as, you know, this is how the song goes. So I'm not going to walk in and go, "Well, that sucks. You ought to do this." More often than not, I'll have a flash of inspiration, and uh, invariably it's received quite, uh, you know, with confidence. And yeah, that's a great idea, Jeff. And I'll say, "Yes, of course it is. I thought of it." Um, so yeah, I'm not really a songwriter as such. I have attempted at times. You know, I've sung I've written a few verses here and there. I think something got recorded with the Borderers. Wrote half a verse or something. So I'm pretty much, I'm there to support what's already happening.
Cool. Yeah, and so you see your role as a support the main songwriter, and then you add the bits in, and then you might add a little bit of flair here and there or whatever, just to help build the story, things like that.
Yeah, Seven Stories was a mixture of being really set, and because you had two other guys in that band, Glenn Lehman, who's an arranger and a composer in his own right, and Mike Bounty, the bass player, had amazing musicality and great ears. So you kind of had three producers in the band already, all picking on the drummer and, getting him in the back room and punching him into obedience. I'm joking. It kind of made my job easier in a way, because they were quite happy to do the thinking for me in a lot of respects. With subsequent, I've done a lot of recordings in the studio with kind of session stuff, mostly local. And, have you got an idea for this? Yeah, well, this is how the song goes. More often than not, if you've been hired, then the artist will trust your instincts and your ability and what you contribute, until there's something happens where they want something very specific. If there's some reading, there might be charts where there's something very specific in terms of a motif that they want you to play, So most of that stuff's been fairly easy for me, but it's also been a great learning curve to work with, quite a cross section of different people and the way they approach stuff.
That's great. That's very interesting. Yeah, and that's also helpful for aspiring musicians who want to be session players as well, because session players find themselves in that situation as well, where they receive a sheet of music and they follow the instructions and and things like that. But also you've had those a few examples where you've had a little bit of a collaboration as well. But yeah, the whole I suppose you said you learnt a lot from all these guys, these really good
Totally.
songwriters. You learnt a
Yeah.
lot,
And
yeah.
and I think if you boil it down to the most simple lesson learned, is listen and be willing to try things that perhaps you haven't, and
Mm,
respect the artist. and what they are asking and require. I mean, it's a different era, but, you know, going back to the days where drummers like Steve Gadd would sit in the studio and he's often said this kind of stuff. He would just listen to what's being said, look at the charts, interpret, and play and give the artist what they want and give the song what it wants. You know, in a sense, you know, probably the best drummers are the ones that aren't concerned about being the best drummers. And I mean that by in as much as that they understand their role as a support. You know, I mean, guys like Steve Gadd will have their own projects where they can go and, you know, burn and flash their chops and stuff. But I don't even think they're in it for that reason. You know, really, it's about the music. It always is. If it's not, then don't be a drummer. It's
Mm.
pure and simple. If
And
you're at home, hey,
oh,
sorry.
sorry, yeah, yeah. I was just going to ask you a question, but yeah, you'll finish your thought, and then we'll continue.
No, that's pretty much it.
Yep, yep,
I hate to say it, there's too many guys around that have, you know, sat in their bedroom for years working up their chops, and then they try and get a band so that they've got an avenue to play their chops. And they're not really interested in playing music.
yeah. That's
It's
true. I've
an
seen that.
entirely different proposition. Anyway, I'll move away from that.
Yeah. So, I was going to ask, like, I've heard some drummers say that, you know, they sort of help control the rhythm. Like, you know, you had Bonham from Led Zeppelin, who would, you know, would really make sure that all the other players are in time. And the importance of that is very crucial. Like, if you have a drummer that doesn't do that, do you think that's a bad thing in a band? Yeah, who doesn't really control the tempo and keep everyone in sync. Is it important for that?
Tempo is essential. And again, if drummers at home practicing and they're not considering their time, they're in the wrong business. I mean, before
Yeah,
you can do those triple flammadiddle whatevers, and you know, I with recording, I mean, in Bottom's day, there wouldn't have been click tracks, metronomic kind of devices in the studio. So it was absolutely essential that the guy, um, you know, had blistering time. But time, you know, meter and time are not entirely dependent on the drummer either. I'm not making excuses for the drummer. The drummer that can't play in time, you know, go and work on it. Different tempos, get on the practice pad or by whatever means. But every musician in the band should have good meter, good time, because you're not going to sit together otherwise. I mean, bands like Led Zeppelin, if we're going to stay on that topic, I mean, Page and John Paul Jones were session guys for years, and it would have been essential to be able to play in time with orchestra, etc. So it's not only incumbent upon the drummer to keep good time; it's everyone's responsibility. But I can tell you this: if the drummer doesn't have a good time, the whole thing is going to tip up. It's not going to work. It's that simple.
mm, interesting. No, thanks for that. And how has music helped you through the tough times?
Look, I don't know life without music, and I don't understand people who don't listen to it. You know, apparently Donald Trump doesn't listen to music, but you know, I just I've not ever known any other life. I mean, that's That's my point of reference. There's always music in my head. Invariably, when I wake up, there's a song in my head. I'm listening to music day and night. So good, bad, glad, bad, sad, indifferent. Music has always been there. Some particularly tough times in my life. In a way, it was fortunate that I was on the road touring because I had that outlet. And as a young kid, adolescent, when friends, were friends were falling off the edge of the earth through heroin or whatever, um, I seemed to be able to hold on because I had the drums, and I had music, and that's probably particular music that I listen to on particular, you know, Joni Mitchell comes to mind at certain times for perhaps. Yesterday I was listening to, and I don't listen to Van Halen very much, but I happen to be reading the drummer's book. And as soon as I put that on, that's the album with Jump. As soon as that song came on, it's just like, there's really happy music. And yeah, like I said, I mean, to keep it simple, I don't know life without music every day of my life. So I don't know what it would be like um, to not have music to draw upon, you know. Uh, it's runs through the veins.
Yeah, it's like breathing oxygen, isn't it?
Pretty much.
Yeah,
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 pretty
it's
much.
part of who we are, that's great. Well,
But,
uh,
the collective thing too of working with others has been, and as time goes on, I much, I appreciate more and more the people I work with. I guess at times with music, it was all very, I want to succeed, so therefore I want the people that are, and it was all sort of, you know, ulterior motives and, selfish kind of greedy kind of moments. Whereas these days, I'm very happy to have the opportunity to play it all, to be honest. And so what it's become is the importance has become more about who I work with. And, I'm about to race off to a rehearsal, and these are my friends, these people. There's not a situation I work in now where the people aren't my friends. It's a, um, but, starting out, and if this is for the benefit of those that are really serious about wanting to work in the music industry, um, you're going to have to be a little bit hard ass. It's just a fact of life. And if you stumble on people that are really good and kind and, empathetic, uh, power to you. But, um, particularly now, I would think it's a very tough industry.
yeah. But I do like what you made that point of having that sense of community, fellowship, that support,
Yeah.
and you share passion with your friends. Um, I think that's a really powerful thing. They become lifelong friends, and I think I like how music brings people together. It doesn't cause divisions. It's more about bringing people together, and I think that's a really powerful thing. And that to
Okay.
me is a great success. Having forming great friendships is another form of success as opposed to the typical
Absolutely. And
thing.
it's taken time for me to see it that way. No, you're absolutely right, Alistair, and a sense of community, and it's, for me, it's no longer about all that other stuff. I mean, when I was with Seven Stories, I make no apologies for the fact that we wanted radio, we wanted hits, we wanted big crowds, we wanted to, we, you know, if you're going to get in that scene, then, you know, and you're not going to poop, then get off the toilet. You know, you've got to go for it. And
Yeah.
I'm glad that I had an opportunity, but I'm also glad that I didn't, you know, turn out like so many other stories where people, you know, tragedy and you know, ridiculous ego and expectation of others. And
Mm.
you know, more and more my attitude is about service. You know, I want to serve the music, and I want to serve people. I want to serve my family, and I want to serve my community. That is, you know, music is a celebration of those things. I mean, if you look at more kind of folk in any um, ethnicity, you know, in any community, it's always about celebrating the fact that, you know, it might be celebrating the harvest, or that, you know, they've helped built their friend's house, and they get around on the barbecue and they pull out the, you know, the bazooka or whatever. You know, I'm not making any kind of, no profiling here. I'm saying music, you know, more often than not was about um, creating a sense of community, and folk music was about celebrating life, you know,
Mm.
not going out and being a pop star.
Yeah, that's true. It's a different mindset, isn't it? No, it's beautiful to get back to the roots of music in that in sense of
Yep,
it being about being in community and building friendships, and sharing our passion for music. It's great. So
totally.
yeah.
Yep.
Um, yeah, so yes, so for all our viewers out there, if you haven't had a chance yet, please like and subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for future episodes. Just an update, next year we planetmuse will be launching certificate 3 for 11 year 12 students in Camberwell in Melbourne at the Camberwell Core. So that's going to be very exciting, and you might see one of these bookmarks flying around somewhere. I'm going to be distributing them across Victoria, and it has a QR code there for the Salvation Army website, and also on the other side there's a QR code for the YouTube channel that we're going to be launching probably in a couple of weeks. So this is our second episode. So thank you again, Jeff. It's been a real pleasure talking to you today, and thank you again for coming on the show. Yeah.
Could I just add that, you know, I was involved in Planet Muse in its very
Oh yes.
inception with your dad, of course,
Yes.
Burnett, and I was just really taken by the idea, and I encourage those out there that might see this to get involved, because it's a great work you guys are doing. Thanks,
Oh, thank
Alistair.
you.
Thanks for the opportunity to talk.
Yeah.
I
Excellent.
hope it made sense.
Yeah, no, it's been a real pleasure. I loved hearing your stories and hearing
Oh,
about your passion for music. So, um,
thank you.
thank thank you, and thank you to our viewers for watching. And stay strong and stay musical, everyone. We'll speak to you soon.